super excited to have one of my good friends here back in studio. She is back for season 2, hosting Collector's Call. It's on MeTV. Season 2 premieres January 12th at 9:30. It's Lisa Whelchel. What's going on?
What's going on?
I don't know. I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried.
What are you worried about?
Well, because you came through last spring. We made lunch plans. Then I bailed on the lunch plans because I had another interview that came up here I had to do, and I was really worried about it. And you're like, don't worry about it. It's no problem. And now you're back in New York, and we have no lunch plans. So I'm worried that I'm on your bad side now.
You are not on my bad side. If I were here even 1 hour longer, I would spend that hour with you. But it's a quick trip.
So what you're saying is you came all to New York just to do this interview with me. That's why you're here. Forget about this Hoda thing happening. This is for me, right?
No, the Hoda thing was just a ruse, just to get me
right. Here. That's it. Look, I love this show because I like to think I collect things. My wife says it's just junk. She says it's garbage. I argue otherwise, Lisa. I say, listen, these 8 tracks that I collect, these Star Wars figures, these Survivor buffs, which you know something about, this is not junk.
No.
This means something to me. She says it's junk. She wants me to throw it all away. But you have this show where you go through people's collections and do all these super cool items. I love it. You did only 13 episodes, right?
The first season.
But now you're like doubling it. What's that all about?
That's right. That's because the collections are coming out of the woodworks, and people are really loving because oftentimes it brings us back to something from our childhood.
Yeah.
You know, we'll think, oh, I had one of those. Or for me, sometimes my brother had one of those. Or there's some things that I didn't collect at all. And I just learned something about a whole nother realm that was off my radar.
Are you a collector? Like, do you collect stuff? Because you strike me as someone that's probably pretty neat, pretty organized. You're pretty on it. Like, unlike me, who's kind of a slob, and I just have stuff everywhere. What would be something that you might collect if you do, or if you were to?
I don't. I'm not a collector. You're right. I am a less is more kind of person. Maybe that's one of the reasons why it's so fascinating to me to interview these people, because I love the collections and they are really fascinating. But it's the people that draw me in, and their stories and why they got started collecting. And there's always a story behind it, and it's always really fascinating. But I'm not much of a collector. My aunt owned an antique store all my growing up, and she used to be my primary traveling buddy and my grandmother. So we would go all across the world, and she would be looking for things for her antique store. And she has multiple just genres of collections.
How much do you collect or hold on to, or does anyone else in your family collect all your old Facts of Life stuff?
I did not. I didn't think ahead. My grandmother kept some things. I actually have more things from the Mickey Mouse Club than the Facts of Life.
Really? Because you were just younger?
Well, because my grandmother was my primary guardian on the show. So she was around, and she was old enough to know to keep some of that stuff. I was on my own for the Facts of Life, and it's just like, oh yeah, it never crossed my mind to keep something.
You didn't keep any of that stuff? No uniforms, no nothing?
Nothing.
You didn't clip off like a lock of George Clooney's hair, nothing like that?
No, I didn't. Nancy McKeon, I went to her house a few years ago in Texas, and I said, how'd you get that sign? She said, well, when the store burned down, when Edna's Edibles burned down, they weren't going to be using the set anymore, and she took the open and close sign from Edna's Edibles. So she had the forethought to do that.
I would have been all over that, Lisa.
I know.
Well, what do you have from the Mickey Mouse Club, or what did you have?
I have some lunch kits and puzzles and coloring books, but that's all because my grandmother kept it for me.
Wow. And so what is it then about people that collect? I mean, are these a bunch of weirdos? And I say that affectionately because I collect stuff myself. As I say, maybe I have a screw loose, because there is something, I don't know if off is the right word, but there is something about people that dedicate whole rooms to collecting certain items. I mean, there's something there.
I agree. And I like that you use the word weirdo, because I once heard that the word weird was originally a word that was used for people that had supernatural gifts. So I say that these people are extraordinary or supernatural, and they are a little bit weird. But as affectionately, that only makes them more interesting.
I mean, it makes them interesting to me. I'm
me
fascinated.
too, and obviously a lot of people, because the show, people are really loving the show, and I think that who wants to watch somebody boring?
Well, it's also, I think, you touched on the nostalgic appeal of it, right? Like, and not just for the collectors, but for viewers. You did one in season 1, I believe, on this guy who collects all these video games and stuff. And like, for me, a guy who grew up playing Atari video games and things like that, that's just, I put myself in his shoes. Now, I'm not going to spend $10,000 on a video game like he may. Now, that's a whole other angle, like, of these people that are not just expanding this time and this thought and this space, but all this money, Lisa. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. But I think there's a Bible verse that says, where your heart is, where your treasure is, and where your treasure is where your heart is. And these people, they collect these things. It's always connected to the heart. And then in turn, they put their money there. And you're right, they spend a lot of money. But
what would you do if your significant other was all of a sudden like, hon, I just spent $20,000 on a rare Harry Potter wand or something like this, or on a Lost in Space ray gun? I mean, what would be your reaction?
Well, I would no longer be my significant other.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I think you would want, to have to know this before you make a commitment to someone like that.
We're talking with Lisa Whelchel, obviously from Facts of Life and Survivor, and now the host of Collector's Call. Season 2 premieres January 12th on MeTV. So what do we have to look forward to on this season, Lisa? I saw a clip on the website that you have, speaking of being on the radio. You got this guy, Mancow, right? And he's going to be on your season premiere, I believe?
Right. And his best friend is Barry Williams, who played Greg Brady. So that's kind of a really fun thing to have. Actually, one scene, I said something, and I said, "So what do you think about that, Greg?" And he said, "Are we doing that? Are you gonna call me Greg?" And I thought it was so weird because people call me Blair all the time, and it doesn't bother me. I understand it, but now I really understand it.
So what's the coolest thing that you've ever seen on this show? What's the one item that you've seen in someone's collection that you said, all right, that, I'm not a collector myself, but that's the one thing I would like to have in my house?
Well, that's a good thing as far as the one thing I'd like to have. The weirdest was the man who collected locks of hair of presidents. That was very weird.
That's a little off.
That's not something that I necessarily would want to have.
I hope you used a lot of Purell after you left.
Yes, I did give him some of my hair, though. I will have to say that we did an episode this season with Charlotte Ray's son. After because as he was going through her things after she passed, he realized that she had some incredible collectibles from her decades in show business. So we did an episode with him and his daughter, Charlotte's granddaughter, and I brought Jerry Jewell, and she made a special appearance. But he had a pennant, an Eastland pennant. And it's one of those things that if they had them on the set all the time, it would have been easy for me to say, hey, can I have one of those? But I wasn't thinking that far in advance.
Charlotte Ray should have been telling you all those years that, hey, keep some of this stuff. Speaking of Facts of Life, you had a little reunion on Lifetime channel recently, right? With Kim Fields and Nancy McKeon and Mindy Cohn with You Light Up My Christmas. What was that whole experience like?
You know what? It's funny because that turned into a thing. It really was just Kim saying, hey, I'm living this movie. I want to have a kind of an homage to Charlotte. We're going to name a skating rink after her. Why don't y'all come up and film one day a couple of scenes? And so it was a fun way to work together. And then they advertised it as a Facts of Life reunion movie, which Nancy wasn't even in it. She was on a phone, like on a video. But
close enough.
I know. But it was a lot of fun to see everybody.
You had to know that they were going to market that as a Facts of Life reunion.
I'm just, my head is not it, I guess.
Who are you playing? You're playing like a hippie shop owner or something?
Yeah, we did get to create our own characters. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to create a character, I want to play a character. So I wanted to play a hippie. And the reason I wanted to play a hippie is because if Edna's Edibles was a shop these days, it would be a totally different shop. And so I wanted to make just a reference to I'm going to go get a delivery from Edna's Edibles. And so I just played it as if I had eaten some Edna's edibles before the scene.
I think our producer would be a patron of that shop. She would be having regular order. Lisa, it's such a blast to hang out with you, and the show is such a blast. Like I said, as someone that collects these kind of things and gets really into the nostalgic aspect of it, it's tons of fun. I love the fact that you do it. I love watching your facial reactions when you see this stuff, because it is a measure of like respect and being impressed, but also a little bit like, oh, okay, all right, I get it. So it's tons of fun. Thanks for coming in to chat about it. Everyone check out Collector's Call Season 2. It premieres January 12th at 9:30 on MeTV.
Hey, and let's get lunch sometime.
Oh, really? Okay, not this time because you're leaving me.
I'm too busy for you this time. I don't have time for you, but
pull up for production.
You didn't have time for me last time. But, it's nothing personal.
Nothing personal. All right, Lisa, thanks so much.